Okay, seems like we are live. Yeah, seems like we are live. All right. Welcome, Shriram, back to Physics of Pranayama channel, the place for left brain, right thinking people.
Thank you so much, Sandeep ji. Namaste to everyone. Thanks for once again giving me the opportunity to discuss about yoga topics.
Oh, it's so much fun to talk to you about yoga, Shriram. I go back and look at our the previous conversation we had on all things yoga, and there are stuff that I forgot. I said, oh wow, we spoke about this. And then when people ask me in other sessions that, oh, can you explain this? I said, oh, go look at the video with Sriram, and he already discussed everything. Like for example, somebody asked me about Shirshasan, the headstand, and the way you explained the thing with the circularity of the ear channel, and it was so beautiful. But before we jump into Sun Salutations, Sriram, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what Maharshi Patanjali, the propounder of yoga, what has he said about the clothes to wear while doing yoga?
That's a very interesting question. I don't recall any sutra where he specifically talks about the attire for yoga sadhana. Um, there is some references to not the clothes, but then how you prepare the space to do your sadhana that is given in the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
So there is one shloka that goes Shuchau Deshe Pratisthapya Sthiram Atmanam Natyuchritam Natinicham Chaila Ajina Kusha Uttaram. So you put kusha grass, or in English we can say cushion, something
Cushion.
soft,
Okay.
and then on top of it put something that insulates water.
Huh.
So if it's damp, then we're not affected in the sadhana. And then on top of it, you put a cloth. So
Okay.
the three layers that are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, but it doesn't really talk about what to wear.
Yeah. Yet there is a whole $1 billion industry on yoga apparel.
That is true.
And like when I go to, let's say, some yoga studios, I notice that most yoga instructors are dressed almost like a uniform. It's like form fitting clothes and this that. And if I show up in this this hoodie and this kind of stuff, and people look at me, what's wrong with this guy? Like, come on. So if I come
Interesting.
to your yoga class, will you be okay if I come in like a hoodie and a little bit of a loose trousers, and it's okay, right?
The thing is, it depends on the practice that we are doing. So, for example, if it's a very intensive, physically intensive practice, then perhaps it's a good idea not to wear something very heavy like a hoodie, because it will allow ease of movement. And interestingly, my teacher, when he taught, so he used to wear a dhoti, and they used to wear it in such a way that it becomes very easy to do all the asanas. So I'm sure you have seen it also in India. People wear the dhoti in a way where it allows movement.
Yeah.
So that's the traditional form that I was introduced to in the beginning.
Yeah, right. Because I like to think that my body is in shape, because a sphere is also a shape. So okay, so
In
yeah.
fact, my teacher, he was also, I would really call him very slim. So that is actually a surprise to many people, because they see him and think that, oh, perhaps he is not very flexible. But then when he starts doing asanas, then, I mean, in fact, people are more impressed. Like, wow factor is more when you see someone who's not so slim. I remember once my teacher told me that nobody is impressed by your asanas, Sriram, he said, because at the time I was so slim, and he said, oh, a spider can do anything. So there is no magic there. There is no wow factor there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so coming back to the topic of today, Sriram, sun salutations. Is there anything to do with the sun, the physical, the object sun? Is sun salutation something to do with the sun?
Yeah, as the name implies, this is primarily a spiritual practice where we honor the sun. And so in yoga, sun has a very special place in our practice. Not just the physical sun, but what it signifies metaphorically. So, for example, yoga talks about the sun and the moon nadis, the Ida and the Pingala nadis. And so sun and the moon are inside the body as well. So, but even if we literally take the word meaning, the physical sun, then even that is something worthy to express our gratitude and appreciation, because the presence of the sun spurs activity on this planet.
Right.
And in fact, this metaphor is actually used in the Bhagavad Gita. There is one verse in the Bhagavad Gita that says that just like the sun, the mere presence of the sun, which is so far away, yet it spurs activity on this planet, the presence of the self spurs activity in this body.
Oh, yeah.
So when the self discards the body or it steps away from the body, then all the physiological processes come to a grinding halt. So just the presence of the life within us spurs activity. And it is said that when we compare life to sun, the prana is the rays of the sun. So the prana that moves in the body is like the sun's rays. So that metaphor is something very nice to behold. And my teacher used to keep saying this. And the exact verse in the Bhagavad Gita goes like this: Yatha prakashayati ekaha kritsnam lokam imam ravihi kshetram kshetri tata kritsnam prakashayati bharata. So yatha prakashayati ekaha, just like how the one sun illuminates the whole earth and spurs all the activities on this planet, the one life within us spurs all the physiological processes in this body.
Yeah, right. So once you put it in this context, simply doing even sun salutations with just this tiny awareness that you're kindling the life within you to shine, that itself is a big step forward, I think. Right?
Yes, and in fact, to articulate that thought more accurately, that light is always there and it is shining brilliantly. What we are doing with our practice is just removing the clouds that hinder that light from exuberantly expressing itself. In fact, Patanjali says in the Yoga Sutras, so he says that all the practice do is to dispel the darkness that surrounds the light.
Yeah, the light is always on, full throttle on. It's not only dim, it is full on. The thing is the vrittis and all these other obstacles that, So Patanjali never formalized this thing as sun salutations, right? He just said something about asanas, and then sun salutations came into the practice a little bit later.
In fact, it's very interesting. When I looked up the history of sun salutation, it's actually a very recent introduction to yoga. It's about 100 years old, which is very recent when you look at the 5,000 plus year tradition of yoga. Because as you rightly pointed out, Patanjali doesn't give specific practices. In fact, it just gives the foundational tenets of yoga practices, including asanas. He doesn't give examples of asanas. And even the later texts, like Hatha Yoga Pratipika and so forth, where they give examples of asanas, they don't talk about sun salutation. So sun salutation was introduced in the 1920s, is what I have read when I looked up the history of how this practice came about. And quite a few names have been given out as these are one of the architects of the sun salutation practice. And one of them is the legendary yogi T. Krishnamacharya. So he put together a set of asanas in sequence. In fact, he created many sequences, about 800 sequences called Vinyasas. And
is that where the word comes from? Vinyasa, yoga, whatever it is, comes from one of these set of combinations that he put together? Is that
correct? In fact, Vinyasa, of course, it's a very well-known term in the yoga community, but the meaning of Vinyasa is very interesting. Vinyasa is actually, it is based on the word asa. Asa has the same root as asana, which means to place something.
Yeah, it's a foundation.
Foundation. You place the body in the posture, or you place the body in the seat. That is asana. And on top of asa, we introduce two prefixes. One is ni. Ni plus asa becomes nyasa.
Yes.
And then vi plus nyasa becomes vinyasa. So ni stands for nitaram. That means to place the whole body. It is not just placed in an unstable manner. You place the whole body, or you place the whole set of postures in a stable way. And then vi means vividha, which means a variety.
Diverse.
So vividha nitaram asa, vinyasa, which means you place the body in different postures in a variety of ways. And in fact, this word vinyasa is also widely used in the Indian classical music. And there, the connotation is more like raga vinyasa, when they say it's creative expression or creative unfolding of your thoughts in that raga. So we can think of the same thing in yoga as well. Vinyasa is nothing but creatively composing different sequence of asanas.
Right.
And a set of those vinyasas that Krishnamacharya composed, if we can use that word, he called them Vishesha vinyasas. Vishesha means special.
Special, yeah, right.
And one of those special vinyasas is the Sun Salutation. And there are others. So Sun Salutation has gained the popularity because it's ubiquitous. Everyone practices Sun Salutation.
Yeah. And it's a complete, is it one of those complete, how do you say, I don't want to call it exercise, but complete routines? It's complete in itself, isn't it?
Yes, it's a well-rounded practice. It attends to all the major muscles, all the major joints of the body. So when we look at our physical aspect of our existence, just the physical body, you can say it's all-round exercise. And of course, we can think, so when we talk about well-rounded discipline, we can think of it in two ways. One is, I'd like to think of it as either a vertical integration or a horizontal integration. So vertical integration means integrating the body, breath, mind, and then all the way to the self. So vertical integration. Horizontal means you take one slice of that. Say you consider the body level. At the body level, does it integrate all parts? In other words, does the practice exercise all parts of the body? So in both respects, we can consider Sun Salutations to be holistic.
Right. Yeah. But what I found is when I do, I'm not as good as you for sure, but when I do Sun Salutations, it's a full grounding because I have to take care of the breath, because some postures you have to breathe in, some postures you got to hold. I mean, there's only one, the plank you hold, then some postures you breathe out. And if you don't synchronize the breath exactly like it is normally happening, the settledness doesn't come. It is, I mean, I did the experiment. I'm a scientist. So I said, okay, I'm not going to breathe as like the teacher tells. And you don't get the depth. It is amazing.
Yeah, in fact, when I learned the Sun Salutation, in fact, that is the first thing that my teacher taught me. On my very first yoga class, he taught me Sun Salutation. For the first few months, he never talked about the breath. He wanted me to develop the muscle memory. So even without thinking, the body just flows. We introduce the samskaras or the habits in the body so that the muscle memory will, there is enough momentum to take you through that practice. And then once the momentum has been established, he gave us the technique of when to breathe in, when to breathe out, and how to align the rhythm of the breath with the rhythm of the body movements. And you are right. When both rhythms are in sync, then resonance happens. So there is a more profound experience of the benefits. We harness the practice more to derive the benefits of yoga.
So could you, I mean, briefly just give like pointers on one or two key things of the breath work along with the postures? We'll get into the posture separately, but is there like a one couple of lines rules that you can summarize so that people can remember those when they're doing the practices?
Yeah, in fact, one rule of thumb is that whenever we expand the body, we breathe in. Right. So expand will include, for example, arching the body, like in the Bhujangasana, the Cobra pose, or in the standing position when we arch back. Okay. So in those expansive movements, you breathe in. And whenever we fold or when we contract, we breathe out. That is a general rule of thumb. In fact, this way of aligning the breath and the body, it has a name. It's called the Brahmana Kriya. Brahmana Kriya means you go with the expansion of the physical. So the breath follows the expansion. Now the opposite is also used sometimes, which is called the Langhana Kriya.
Okay.
So that is actually used as an exception for certain situations to use as a therapy. Or when someone is trying to do the posture for the first time, it is easier to do it in the opposing manner. For example, when people are attempting a deep back bend for the very first time, they will find it easier to do that while breathing out. But that is an exception. That's just like the beginning, like a stepping stone. And once they become comfortable in that, then we come back to the Brahmana Kriya. That is the main rule of thumb.
It is so interesting you say this, Shriram, because many years ago, when I started teaching the Art of Living course, and I would ask people, when you're breathing in and out, does your stomach go out in the in breath or no? And it was completely the reverse. The stomach would go in the in breath. And I'm saying, all right. And then the way we fixed, I mean, not fixed it, but aligned it is you get them to lie down, put the hand on the belly. And when you breathe in, you say, push out your hand. And then it clicks. But you're so right. It is easier to do it reverse than to do it properly. Yeah, it is amazing. Okay, this is a great, this is exactly the rules I follow. So when the body is bending, like closing, you breathe out, and in the plank position, it's not doing anything, so you hold. Okay, that's great.
Yes.
Anything else? Okay, so now we'll come to the physical postures. It's a very
one thing.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
One of the rules that my teacher used to say when we talk about aligning the breath and the body movement is, he used to say the primary rhythm is always the breath. The body should follow the breath and not the other way around.
Oh, yeah.
You see? To establish the slow, long, deep breathing rhythm first, and the body movement should follow that. It's not that you establish the pace by doing the postures in flow and then align your breath to that. It's not like that at all.
Right. But is there a, well, we'll come to it. So in Sun Salutations, is there a warm up to Sun Salutations? Is that a recommended practice? Or you can go cold into Sun Salutations?
If we do that, if we go cold, in other words, if we start our practice with Sun Salutation, then the recommendation is that for the first couple of rounds, at least, you do it very gently, like a warm-up. Don't need to try and do 100% like what I did yesterday, that amount of flexibility to express itself in the first 2 rounds. That's not the expectation there. So the first 2 rounds is just to keep the prana moving brisk. And then once the body is warmed up, we can go deeper and deeper. And of course, the later rounds of the Sun Salutation can itself be the core practice of the session. We can make the Sun Salutation itself core practice. And of course, we can introduce some variations and all that. But yes, we can start as a warm-up and then we can unfold the practice of Sun Salutation as the core of the sadhana as well.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So now we come to the physical, let's say the postures. It's not really postures. It's like you said, the combination of one flowing into the other. You start with, how do you say, the Namaste pose, right? Yeah. And in the Namaste pose, at least when I learned, I did not pay attention. The Namaste pose is a in and out breath, isn't it? You do in and out. And then the next one, when you bend back, then it becomes in and then out. But the Namaste pose is a in and out. Is that right?
Yeah, the Namaste, it depends on the yoga tradition. So the way in which my teacher taught me is you come to the Namaste position by first extending the arms up in the Tadasana and then breathe out, come to the Namaste.
Okay.
And then as you breathe in, you extend the arms and arch back in inhale.
Okay, right. Yeah, so that's a subtlety that I did not know. So it's a full thing. When you take your hands in, up, automatically it's in, then out. But when I was taught, it was do this, and then there is no hand going up. So I had to do in and out. Otherwise, it doesn't follow. I see. This is great. And then the back bends. And is there any tips you would recommend? I mean,
in fact, this standing back bend, that is the second posture in the series, and also the penultimate posture, because we will repeat it again towards the end of the Sun Salutation sequence.
Right.
So this has a lot of nuances to keep in mind. So first of all, as beginners, when somebody is doing the Sun Salutation for the first time or the first week of introduction to yoga, so it's better to be a little bit more cautious, because most people are not really training the spine for arching or bending back postures. Because day-to-day activities, we bend forwards to pick up objects and so forth. Nobody bends back to pick up their keys.
Yes.
So it might be the first time perhaps they're doing.
Unless you're in an aircraft and somebody's behind you and say, "Oh, wait."
Yeah, and it's better to exercise caution even there.
Even there, yeah. Right.
But the best way to warm up the spine for arching postures is like the Bhujangasana, the Cobra pose. That will come later. But this posture, the Ardha Chakrasana, the second posture in the Sun Salutation, it has to be done with a little bit of care, because it's a standing arch, and especially if we're doing it with the arms overhead. So there is a little bit more of there is a moment that is greater there. So the effort is actually a little more than what we imagine that to be. And some of the tips around this posture is, when we send the arms back, when we arch, in order to align the center of gravity.
Wait. So do the arms touch or do they not touch? Is it like this, or do the arms go into a touch position and go back in a touch format? Do they go back touching, or do they go back without touching?
I have seen different yoga traditions having their own instructions, and the way I was taught is to keep the hands together. And the objective is that whenever we do asanas, we make sure that the whole body is one organic unit. So when we keep the arms separate, when we are not touching the hands, then it could be, they may not be exactly aligned, or you don't see them as one single unit. They're two separate center of gravities.
Right.
So when you touch them, and also I've learned Sun Salutation through various traditions, and one of the tradition is the Vinyasa Krama, which is through the lineage of Krishnamacharya. And there we actually hold the hands in this manner. We interlace the fingers.
Oh, I see.
And
the palms are facing up. Palms are facing up. Okay, I see.
Yeah. And then you arch back. So whatever is the hand position, we are actually sending the arms back, which means to align the center of gravity with the vertical axis, so that it's in the same vertical axis as the feet, because otherwise we will topple and fall down. So in order to align the center of gravity, something should move forwards.
Right.
And it is the pelvis that moves forwards.
Right.
And this is important to keep in mind, because sometimes beginning students, they send the pelvis also back.
Yeah, and then you have to take a half a step back to keep your position. Yeah.
So we have to consciously do that. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Another couple of pointers to keep in mind. So here we are exercising the spine in spinal extension, basically arching of the spine. Sometimes, in order to go a little bit more, some people try to bend the elbows and the knees, thinking that, I can reach a little bit more. But it defeats the purpose, as you see, because it's not like, for example, if the arms are like this and arching by bending the elbows like that. And similarly, the standing position, bending the knees.
Yeah.
So there is the illusion that, I've reached farther back, but then it's not the spine that is doing the work, it is the elbows and knees. So the instruction is to keep the knees and elbows as straight as possible. In other words, don't bend them. So that is another thing to keep in mind. And here is a very, very important thing. In fact, this is perhaps the most important to remember in this posture, is many times, or Sandeep, you might also have experienced on some days when we practice the Sun Salutation, during the arching back postures, you may have experienced some lightheadedness or dizziness sensation.
Yes.
So especially when we, towards the end of the Sun Salutation, when we come out of the forward bend and arch back, so what is happening is that when we bring the trunk of the body to the upright position, very quickly,
Mm-hmm.
then if the circulation, the blood circulation is not very brisk, then it didn't have time to reach the head region.
Yeah.
So there is insufficient circulation of the blood in the head region, and that is something to be very watchful about, because sometimes if it gets out of hand, then people can actually fall down because they become so dizzy or so lightheaded that they fall down, and that's something to be watchful for. And the way to prevent that, here is the key. The way to prevent that is, whenever we do this arching posture, tighten the muscles of the legs. Bring that into your muscle memory.
I see.
So what happens when you tighten the muscles of the legs is that it squeezes the blood vessels, and so the blood doesn't go into the lower extremities. It still has opportunity to hang around in the upper body, and the head, the brain still has the circulation.
Yes. Also, another thing, Shriram, maybe tightening of the legs, because if you think about it, the heart is a pump and it's going through the arteries, but the veins have no motive force. The heart has to overcome also the veins. So in the veins, if you look at it, the structure, there are these reverse baffles, right? So when you compress the muscles, it pushes the blood in the right directions to the veins. It sends it back to the heart more. So this is a great tip to tighten the muscles so that blood comes back.
You are right. The difference between the arteries and the veins, very important to highlight, because so when somebody talks about the blood pressure, when they say 120/80, that is a normal healthy adult blood pressure that usually is quoted, right? The systolic and the diastolic. That is the pressure of blood in the arteries. The arteries close to the heart. But when the blood flows from the arteries and then crosses the capillaries and enters the venous system, the veins, then the pressure is about 1/10 as in the arteries. And in fact, about 65% of the blood volume is actually in the veins.
In the veins, exactly, because it's the low flowing system. Yeah.
Exactly. So there is, we need some additional push to assist the heart in order to bring the blood back to
its
heart. And there are three mechanisms to do that. And one of them is what we saw, namely the muscles. When we tighten and relax the muscles alternately, it's like a pump and it assists the heart. And there are other mechanisms. One more mechanism is the respiratory pump. So what happens in the respiratory pump is, so when you take a deep breath in, so what do? We are actually expanding the chest cavity, the thoracic cavity. And because there is a lower pressure, the air gushes in from the high pressure to the low pressure gradient that is created in the chest region. Now the heart also sits in the thoracic cavity. So when we expand the thoracic cavity, the heart also is in a place of low pressure. So what happens is, the blood in the venous system, the veins, they are actually
sucking in
to the heart. Yes.
It's beautiful.
So our breathing, when we take deep breath in, when we sustain a deep breath in, we're actually assisting this circulation.
The venous system to pull it back. Exactly. It's beautiful.
And to complete this thought, there's also a third mechanism of how to bring the blood back to the heart, and that has to do with gravity. So, for example, when we stand upright, the heart is actually 2/3 of our height up. Most of the blood is actually in the lower extremities, and they have to fight against the gravitational resistance to come back to the heart. And so in yoga, we have postures where we do topsy-turvy, like inverted postures, where gravity is no longer resisting, gravity assists the blood. So that is the third mechanism. And if you see, yoga is perhaps the only discipline that uses all these three mechanisms.
Especially the inversion. I don't think anybody else does inversion, right?
Yeah, integrating inversions and then integrating the alternate contraction and relaxation of muscles and deep breathing. So it's amazing that all the three mechanisms you will find in the practice of yoga.
So in Sun Salutations, there is no inversion, Shriram.
Correct. In Sun Salutations, there is no inversion, but there are, you could say, preliminary inversion practices, such as the third pose. So the posture immediately after the Ardha Chakrasana that we just discussed. The next posture is the Padahastasana. The forward fold. So the level of the head is below the level of the heart.
Yes.
So it's like a half inversion.
Okay, yeah. So for the next one, this is a great segue to the next one. In the next one, for me, I'm no chance my palm is going to be on the floor like this. It's impossible. So I will cheat. I will put only the tips of my fingers to touch the floor. Is that good enough?
Yes, and the objective is not to reach a specific milestone like fingertips or placing the palms. And you will notice that with each day's practice, we are able to increase the zone of comfort. So
Yeah.
slowly the flexibility will expand,
Right.
but there is no target goal that the asana is perfected only if this milestone is reached. Not like that at all.
Okay. But no, okay, maybe I didn't ask the question correctly. Is it enough to simply bend forward, or is it enough, or is it necessary to even bend the knees if required so that the tips actually touch the ground? Which is the correct way of doing it?
That's a
Or
good question. And again, different traditions of yoga have their own thought around this. So, especially for beginners,
Hmm.
the recommendation is that feel free to bend the knees. Feel free to bend the knees. Later on, to experience a deeper stretch along the hamstring, the back of the legs, it is better to keep the knees straight. And some schools of yoga actually they also suggest locking the knees, lock the knees.
Hmm.
And the way you lock the knees is by tightening the quadriceps and pulling the
Yeah.
kneecap up.
Yeah. Right.
So, but for beginners, it's a good idea to bend the knees if needed. And one of the main reasons why that is suggested is because of any discomfort in the lower back. Whenever we do forward bending postures,
Hmm.
it's very important that we are careful, especially if there is discomfort. Even if there is a very tiny discomfort in the lower back,
Hmm.
then either we have to step back so that the discomfort is relieved or come out of the pose fully.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if the knees are straight, then because of the deeper stretch in the hamstring muscles, the hamstring will start pulling on the low back.
Ah, yeah.
So this will actually exacerbate the discomfort in the lower back, and that is not recommended at all.
So you relieve it by saying, okay, you bend the knees.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So the way I've done it over the years is I started off by bending the knees and touching, and now it's becoming easy to touch. But then I say, all right, now I'm going to straighten my knees so that you feel that little bit stretch, and then you say, fine. Even today, my knees are never straight. Okay, I'm going to, in interest of full disclosure, I've been doing it for like 10 plus years, but even still now, the hamstring is not fully, how do you say, extended. Okay, fine. That is the physiology of me, but it's different for other people. So the next one is you go down. Then the next one is one of the legs goes back. Does it have to be
Yeah.
the right leg on the first one, or can it be the left one?
It can be left or right, it doesn't matter. And as long as it's balanced.
Huh.
So when we look at, if we do like 12 rounds, then half the number of times when we do this particular asana, this is called Ashwa Shanchalana Asana,
Okay.
equestrian pose.
Yeah.
And make sure that half, so that there is a balance in the body.
So even in this one, there are a little bit of things to keep attention, right? So when the leg that is not gone back, the ankle has to be at right angles, and there are some other couple of things. The leg that has gone back, does the sole of the leg has to face up, or is the toe on the ground? These tiny little corrections, if you could suggest.
Yeah, again, it depends on the yoga school, the style of yoga. And the most common practice is that the sole of the back foot is facing the sky.
Up, okay. And the knee?
Uh, yeah, and the knee, in the traditional practice that we are familiar with, the knee is touching the ground, the back knee is touching the ground.
Down.
And the forward leg, as you rightly pointed out, the ankle is
Is that
basically at right angles to the ground.
right?
And the knee of the forward leg is actually exactly above the ankle.
Ankle, right.
So it's vertical.
And where is the hands?
Yes, that's a good point. In fact, my teacher used to give this guiding principle. So let's rewind to the previous posture. Previous posture is we bend forward and place the palms on the ground. Assume it's possible. Or
Okay,
if you have to bend the knees, so you
fingers.
place the
Fingers.
place the palms either by bending the knees or not.
Yeah.
Once you plant the hands on the ground, the palms on the ground, from that position until you come out later.
Oh, don't move.
Don't move the hands at all. The palms are firmly planted on the ground throughout the next 5 or 6 postures. They are in the same spot.
Yes, yes. Okay, now it makes sense also. I will tell you why it makes sense, because I had another question, but now it makes total sense. All right, so now the leg has gone back and the sole is facing up, knees on the ground. How important is it to stretch forward and arch back and look up? Suppose I don't do that, is that okay, or is that arch important?
Yes, it is okay even without the arch, but to get the true benefits, it is good to do that arch. In fact, my teacher used to insist on that. He used to say, push the pelvis closer to the ground,
right?
Look further up. And increase the arch along the spine.
Yeah.
So that will actually give a more deeper experience in the hip region. So it's like it's a hip opener basically.
Yeah.
We're able to open the hips even more, make it more flexible by pushing the pelvis closer to the ground and looking further up.
But is there anything to take care of? Because you could hurt yourself doing that very easily.
Oh, of course. The primary rule is that whenever we experience any discomfort or pain, just step back.
Yeah.
So there should not be any discomfort at all.
So as far as possible, do that, look up. Okay. Then the next one is the leg in the front goes back. Now it's a little bit tricky because now the sole of the back leg is facing up, but now it has to be folded so that it comes on the toes.
Yeah, so to curl the toes under first and then lift the knee off the ground and then move the other leg back.
And now you're in plank. And in this posture, you have to hold the breath, right? From the previous one to this one, you do nothing.
Yes, there are 2 options. And the classic version is you hold the breath there. Now, for beginning students, if that is uncomfortable, because if they run out of breath, what you could do is you could actually breathe out and breathe in. You take one full cycle of breath. So, and this posture, the plank pose, the dandasana, it's called the dandasana or the stick or staff pose. This is actually a very underrated asana in the sense it has much more benefits than it seems. It appears to be a very simple posture, right?
Yeah,
but it has
nothing's
profound
happening.
Benefits because in order to hold the posture without hanging the hips too loose or raising the hips too high, you need the body to be collinear. In other words, the head, pelvis, and the feet should be in the same line.
Straight line, yeah.
Like an inclined plane, right? In order to hold the integrity of this posture, this collinear structure of the posture, we actually need to engage the abdominal muscles. Right? Yeah. Now, the abdominal muscles, it's interesting. There are multiple layers of musculature in the abdomen. Usually, when people talk about six-pack muscles, they have a well-developed six-pack muscles. So that is the most superficial or the most external set of muscles. It's called the rectus abdominis. And that is what we strengthen when we do, for example, like hardcore sit-ups exercises and so forth. And in yoga, we can achieve similar things by naukasana, the boat posture and so forth. Now, what this plank pose does is it strengthens the deeper muscles of the abdominal musculature, transverse abdominis muscles. And this is especially important because the true power of the abdominal muscles is actually comes from the deeper. And this is what we use, for example, when we forcefully breathe out, when we do Kapalabhati, for example, we're actually engaging the deeper muscles of the abdomen. So I'm reminded actually of an incident that happened about 10 years back when I was teaching a Sri Shri Yoga course. So in the course, we had a participant who had, for 15 years, he was intensely practicing weights. And he had a well-developed muscle, biceps, triceps, and six packs, maybe 8 packs. Like it was like a lot of, you can see that he was a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
So in one of the Sun Salutation rounds, I asked everyone to hold the plank pose for several breaths. Let's hold this posture for several breaths.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was he could not hold it for more than like 4 seconds. His body started shaking.
Oh, yeah.
And plop, he just fell down to the ground. And actually, the next day he didn't come because his ego was hurt a little bit.
Yes,
so, and then I had to call him and request him to please come back. So I'm mentioning this because sometimes we don't realize that we're not exercising some muscles, especially the deeper muscles.
Right.
So this posture exercises the core abdominal muscles as well as the triceps, because you need to hold with the arm strength.
Right. Okay, Shriram. Important thing, when we are in the plank position, where are the shoulders? Are the shoulders like, is it okay to droop the head down, or the shoulders are away from
that's
the
not no, don't droop the head down. Actually, if you look at how the shoulders should be, I forget the exact technical name for that. I'll look it up and I'll add in the comments in the YouTube later. Okay. So basically the structure should be between the two shoulders, the middle of the spine should have like an upward arch.
Okay, right.
So it should be convex to the top. And there is a name for that. I think it's called it's protraction. Opposite is called retraction. So this is protraction.
Protraction. Okay.
Protraction is the correct way. And there is a reason for this, which is because whenever we have a structure that is supported on both ends, but there is no support in the middle,
right,
then the best way to redistribute the destabilizing forces is to have an arch, and that's why you have arches and bridges. And
bridges, yes, right. Yeah. Okay, good. So now we are in plank. Then so the next one is the 8-point contact, right? And here is why it now makes sense what you said. I never understood why the hip has to be lifted off the floor when you're doing the 8-point contact. Now it makes sense, because if the hands are not allowed to move, it is an aspect ratio problem. You cannot go straight unless you lift the hip. The chin doesn't come to the floor. It is completely mathematical, I think.
That's interesting. In fact, I never thought like that, but that's a very beautiful insight. Yeah,
because
I learned something. That's a beautiful insight. Yeah.
Otherwise, there is no reason for the hip to be lifted up. The only reason hip is lifted up because the toes are fixed, the hands have not moved. The body cannot come with the chin unless the hips go up. It is impossible to do that.
That's true. In fact, my teacher used to tell me that in the actual practice, in the traditional in the sense, the classic practice of the Sun Salutation, after the plank pose is the Chaturanga Dandasana, where we bend the elbows and we bring the body flat and parallel to the ground. It's like a push-up, static push-up.
How?
But
how does that
work? Because for some people who have not done this posture before, may not have the strength in the arms to hold that posture, we make it easier by replacing it with the 8-point contact, maybe the Ashtanga Namaskara.
Yeah, right.
But in the classic practice, we have the Chaturanga Dandasana, where we bend the elbows and then the body is flat and parallel to the ground.
But the toe is off the floor?
The toe is curled under.
Oh, okay. So I have to see you do that, because I've never learned that. Never. For me, it has always been the 8-point, and I said, all right, there has to be a reason why the hip has to go up, and then I figured out that if you don't allow the hands to move, then it makes total sense. And when you said it, I said, all right, good. Okay, so after the 8-point contact, you come into the, how do you say, the
Bhujangasana, the Cobra pose.
Cobra.
Yeah.
So there are many ways to do this wrong, and there is only one way to do it right.
Many ways to do right also. It depends on the tradition of yoga.
But could you please tell us the wrong way of doing it? Then we know what is the right way of doing it.
Yeah, many things to keep in mind.
Yeah.
One of the things is to always make sure that the pelvis is on the ground. So we can think of it as we are peeling the upper body off the ground. Not all the way to the knees, but only all the way to the pelvis. The pelvis is firmly touching the ground.
Right.
Okay. So that is one thing to keep in mind. It's just the upper body.
Yeah.
And the second thing is we are peeling it. So every vertebra along the spine is contributing to the arch.
Okay, right.
It's not bending, it's arching. So there's a curvature at every segment along the spine. And then another thing to keep in.
Here it's important that the elbows are not close, because it's easy for the elbows to be close to the ears, isn't it? The elbows.
You're right.
I'm not elbows, not elbows, shoulders.
Yeah, the shoulders should be away from the ears and rolled back. So away from the ears and rolled back. And then the elbows should be close to the body. It should be like this.
Close to the body.
It should not spread away from the body. The elbows should be close to the body. And with the continued practice, the practitioner can actually straighten the elbows. It's not needed to straighten the elbows, but with continued practice, when the flexibility
it's about the arch of the spine. So that's the only degree of freedom you have to because mine don't straighten. I can tell you, mine are
with practice will happen.
I've been at it for 10 years now. Okay, fine.
And there are a couple of more things to keep in mind is to keep the feet together.
Yes. Yeah.
So sometimes the feet will spread apart, and the reason why we keep
here we are transitioning from plank. So in the plank, the toe is on the mat or on the floor. So in Bhujangasana, in the next one, again the sole of the feet is facing up, right?
Correct. Yeah, in the classic practice, but there are other practice also. In fact, some traditions replace the Bhujangasana with the upward facing dog, Urdhva Mukha Shvanasana, where we actually keep the toes under, and even the pelvis and the knees are lifted up, such as, for example, in the Ashtanga Vinyasas. But in the practice that we are talking about, the pelvis is on the ground, the knees are on the ground, and the soles of the feet are facing up.
Facing up, okay. And then you arch the vertebrae up. Keep making sure that the shoulders are away from the ears, okay. And after that is now the downward dog.
Yeah.
So now, please tell us the common mistakes that people make in downward dog. I have seen all kinds of downward dogs,
Yeah, downward dog is actually an excellent posture. This is one of the most amazing postures. And for example, in the tradition of Krishnamacharya, he used to teach the bandhas, the Uddiyana bandha, Muladhara bandha, first in this posture, because we are actually extending the spine, we are stretching the spine, and this becomes very easy to practice the, of course, Jalandhara bandha we can introduce, but mainly the Uddiyana bandha and the Muladhara bandha, we can actually draw the belly closer to the spine using suction effect, not with muscular effort. So there are two ways to draw the belly in. One is to expand the chest cavity so that it will draw the diaphragm up. Exactly. The other way is the muscular effort, but then here we are talking about the suction.
Suction effort.
So this is an excellent practice, especially for the abdominal organs. And we have so many, in fact, there are 4 systems. So when we look at some of the yoga texts, they talk about 6 internal organs. 2 of them reside in the thoracic cavity and 4 of them reside in the abdominal cavity.
Right.
So in the thoracic cavity, we have the respiratory system and the circulatory system, the heart and the lungs. In the abdominal cavity, we have the stomach. We have the kidneys,
liver,
and then we have the elimination system of elimination, the colon, and finally the reproductive organs. So all of these reside in the abdominal cavity. So by doing these bandhas, we are actually exercising all the internal organs of the abdominal cavity.
Right.
And all of this actually is nicely described in many yoga texts, including a classic yoga text called Yogarahasya. So anyway, we are digressing a little bit. When we,
no, it's good.
When we come back,
if you can send me I don't know if there is an online version or a link to this yoga. I'll put it in the the description of this video on the YouTube thing, so people can, like a one-stop shop. You can go and see what is going on. Yeah.
Sure.
All right, go ahead. So wait. So let me ask you the question in a more direct way. palms are not moving, is it important in downward dog for the sole to be on the floor fully, or is it okay to be off the floor like that?
So my teacher used to insist on the heels touching the ground.
Touching the ground.
And if it is not easy to do that, he used to recommend walking the feet few inches towards the hands. Not too much, just a few inches. Not all the way that you come back to Padhastasana. Just a few inches. And then it becomes easier to rest the heels on the ground.
Yeah, so this is
and
my is my experience also. If I'm allowed to move the toes maybe 2 inches forward, then my heel goes down. But if you tell me you cannot move the toes, for me it's impossible to do it.
Yeah, this is a good thing to keep in mind because it'll give a nice deep stretch to the hamstring muscles. And again, this is also forward bending posture. We need to be very careful with the low back. Any discomfort, if there is in the lower back, we make sure that we relieve it. So that is another thing to keep in mind. And also this is inverted posture too, because the level of the heart is the level of the head is below the level of the heart.
Below the level of the heart. Right.
And a couple of things, very interesting things that have, I would say, evolved in the recent years of yoga, the recommendation around the downward facing dog. So how do we position our shoulders and the arms? And so if you look at some of the classic yoga books from the 1960s, 1970s, like for example, B.K. Iyengar's Light on Yoga book, if you see how he does the downward facing dog, he actually brings the top of the head all the way to the floor. That's an incredibly deep stretch. Incredibly deep stretch. And for adept yogis, they can do that because it gives an amazing effect. In fact, the top of the fontanelle actually carries some body weight.
Wow.
It's like a preparation for Shirasasana, you can think of. But in the last few years, the recommendation is that don't do that. And so let me explain a little bit. So how do you position your shoulders? It has to do with the shoulders. So let me see whether I can show that in the video here. So I'm going to place my palm here.
That's the yoga mat.
Yes. Yeah. Imagine that this is the yoga mat and I'm placing my palm here.
This is now becoming the matrix, Shriram. The gravity does not play.
Yes. So remember, the position of the hand is same. We are not moving it since like 3 or 4 postures back. Right? It's like this. Now, keeping the hand in the same position, we can actually, so let me show the eye of the elbow. You can actually turn like
the
this,
rotational degree of freedom there. Yes.
Yes, that's a rotational degree. And which rotational degree would you keep in the downward facing dog? The recommendation now is that externally rotate the shoulders. So when you rotate the shoulders externally, the eye of the elbow is pointing up. It's not like this, it's like this. Okay. You can try it yourself against her.
I see. I see what you're saying. Yes. Okay. Right. So the arm moves outward like that.
Exactly. The reason why we do that, it ties back to what we just talked about, the head touching the floor and all that. So the reason why we do that is with external rotation of the shoulders, it brings more stability to the shoulder joints. Otherwise, what happens is that it puts a lot of strain on the rotator cuff muscles. There are 4 rotator cuff muscles, and one of them called the teres minor. So that becomes strained when we do internal rotation, which is not recommended. And it is the internal rotation that we need to bring the top of the head to the ground. So with the recommended version now, the external rotation, it is impossible to bring the top of the head to the ground. You will notice that the trunk of the body will now be aligned with the arms. They'll all be in the same line.
Same line. Yeah. Right.
So that is what is recommended to bring more stability to the upper body, especially along the shoulder joints.
And isn't it important to push back, not push back, but how do you say? Move the belly button moves towards the knee, isn't it?
Towards especially when we are doing the bandha. Remember, if you're doing Uddiyana bandha, you're actually drawing the navel closer to the spine.
No, okay, right. So it's sucked in, but position wise, it's you want to push it so that it moves towards the knee direction. If you do the arrow, otherwise it's like a not a perfect V. It's like one of those lopsided V's. To make it perfect V, at least that's what I did. So I moved a couple of inches ahead so that the sole of the feet is there, and then I intentionally, it's as if I'm making my belly button go towards the knee so that it becomes, then it's, at least for me, it becomes so steady. That's a beautiful posture. I could be in downward dog like for 8 or 10 breaths, but then people think, oh, you're cheating because you're not doing anything.
Yes. In fact, I'm wondering, maybe in about a few minutes, I can actually show a downward dog.
Oh yeah,
how to do it correctly. I can put on a slide, or I can share a screen, so that visually we can see like what's going on. Maybe I'll bring up that picture and then we can see that.
Yeah. Okay, so downward dog. After that, what? Then the other leg comes, then the same leg comes forward, right? Whichever leg went back, it comes forward now.
Correct. So we are now back to the Ashwa Sanchalanasana.
But it's the same leg. In one side, the same leg is moving. The first leg moved back, then the same leg is coming forward.
Correct. Yes, that is one strategy. But ultimately, the main objective is to give chance for both the left and right leg to have equal shared experience, 50-50. So, but either you can balance it in the same one round or in a pair of sun salutation. Make sure that there are 2 + 2. You see.
Right, but this was my lead off question after that. There is no need for pairing because it's a fully symmetric. One round is fully symmetric. As long as the same leg moves, you're done.
Correct.
So you could, that's not necessary to be an even number.
Correct. If we don't make sure of the same leg coming forwards, then you have to compensate it in the
then you have to do 2 times. Correct. That's the only asymmetry. Which leg is going? If you mess up there, then you're asymmetric. Then you're right. It has to be pair of 2. Okay, great. So now we are back to that. We discussed it. And okay, so wait. So then now we have to come back to the forward bend, but in a reverse manner, right? Because the leg is now.
Exactly.
Yeah. Something.
And you will notice, my teacher always used to say that the forward bend that we do in the second half of the sun salutation, you will notice it feels very different from the first.
Exactly. This was my question to you, because for me, the second forward bend is never the same as the first one.
So is it easier or is it deeper? Is it
for me, the second one becomes a little bit easier, but I cheat. I lift my fingers off the floor when I'm coming down because I'm a little bit cheating. But my second one is much more easy than the first one, no matter which round of sun salutation I'm on.
Yes. Because we have done so many postures in between, and especially the downward dog where we have exercised the hamstrings again. And not only that, when we integrate the back bends, such as in the Cobra and so forth, so every back bend posture creates space for a deeper forward bend in the next time when we do it. So they go hand in hand. It's like sleep and activity. When we get enough rest, then we are able to do better in terms of activity. And the more active we are, the more deeper is the state of sleep. So like that, they both help each other. They complement each other.
Yeah. Okay. And now we are back to the second bend, and now we have to go to the backward bend again, right?
Yeah.
And then we discuss that, and then you come back to Namaste. So that is the set of 12. Right?
Yeah.
So
that is one round of the classic sun salutation.
Okay.
So I have this picture in front of me. Shall I quickly share it?
Wait. So I'll make you a co-host, I think. Otherwise, I have to enable it. Hang on. So how do I make you co-host? Hang on. Co-host. Yeah, there you go. So now you should have. Now sharing should be okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So let me share the screen here. So this is a demo by this is my wife, Eka.
Yeah.
and she is demonstrating the
Beautiful.
Adho Mukha Shwanasana, the downward facing dog.
Right.
So you can see, first of all, look at the Uddiyana bandha. You can see the stomach caving in.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
In fact, in yoga texts, in classical yoga texts, this caving in of the stomach, they call it vrikodaraha. Vrikodaraha means like a hungry wolf. Hungry wolf, you can
Oh,
actually
yeah,
see
yeah.
the stomach caving in.
Right.
So
But
that is how
her
it is
stomach is
described there.
caving in by suction, you said, right? It is not by
Yes,
extraction. It is because the chest has moved out that the stomach is pulled
exactly.
in. This is the key
Exactly.
difference, Sriram. I
Yeah.
don't think this nuance was not very clear to me till you explained it.
Yeah, this is through suction effect, we can draw it more in. In fact, the next step after this, the classical practice of Uddiyana bandha, the next step is called Nauli Kriya. Nauli, you might have seen, moving, the churning the stomach round and round. There are videos you can look up of Swami Ramdev ji.
Yes, yes.
So that becomes easier when we train the Uddiyana bandha using the suction effect and not through muscular effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that is one thing to see here. And notice the feet are firmly planted, they're flat on the ground. The heels are touching the ground.
Yeah.
And then notice also the external rotation of the
Yes.
shoulder. That is why the head is actually in line between the arms.
Yeah.
You see, the
Yeah.
top of that is not coming closer to the ground.
Right.
So this is how we bring the stability to the shoulders and the head region.
And this is what I was saying, that even when you're doing the stomach is pulled in, etc., directionally, if you move the navel towards the thigh, let's say,
I see. Now I
then it becomes
understand. Yeah,
perfectly V. Otherwise, it becomes a lopsided V. You see what I'm saying?
correct. Yes.
Yeah. 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 Lovely, lovely. All right. Very good. Okay, great. So we covered all the 12 basic. So you said there are like couple of variations people do, and
Yeah, in fact, across yoga schools, there are many variations. In fact, there is 10-step Surya Namaskar. There is 12-step Surya Namaskar is what we discussed now.
Yeah.
And then there are, for example, in the tradition of Pattabhi Joyce's Ashtanga Yoga system, we don't really have the Bhujangasana. It's replaced with the upward facing dog. Adho Mukha, the Urdhva Mukha Shwanasana. And then some systems, including the Ashtanga Vinyasa of Pattabhi Joyce, we don't really have the Ashwa Sanchalanasana, the equestrian pose, where we take one leg at a time.
Okay, right.
From the Padahastasana, you directly jump back. And with continued practice, it doesn't really look like a jerky movement where we take the leg like a jump back. It becomes like a floating movement. There is so much control in the body, and they exercise that control through the bandhas actually, especially the Mula bandha. You can actually develop so much control that the legs float back and jump into the Chaturanga Dandasana.
Yeah.
So that is really beautiful to watch. It's like a dance movement.
Yeah.
And by the way, that brings me to a very interesting point. How do you know whether we are jumping or floating? In other words, when we transition from one posture to the next, how do we recognize whether there's a jerky movement or not? Because whenever there's a jerky movement, there is more chance of bringing discomfort or even injury to the body.
Right.
And in yoga, we try to avoid any jerky movement.
Yeah.
So when we move from one posture to the next, even the simple act, for example, if we are bringing the arms down, so well-controlled movement of the arms down rather than drop, like plop, it just falls to the ground. So how do we recognize this? And my teacher gave an amazing tip.
Wait, can I give you my answer?
Yeah.
And you
sure. Yeah.
The way to recognize this is to see whether the breath is jerky or not. If the breath
becomes an excellent point. Yeah.
You're done.
Yes. That is a beautiful way to
no matter how smooth the action is, if the breath is jerky, the action is jerky. There's no confusion.
Totally agreed. In fact, the breath is one of the primary indicators. So my teacher used to say, suppose someone were to record a video of you doing this transition from one posture to the next.
Yeah.
Now play the video in reverse. Does it still look plausible? For example, if someone drops a bottle of ink,
Lovely. Yes.
so entropy increase. So to talk about physics, thermodynamics, right? So when there is no jerky movement, it is what is called a reversible process in
Beautiful.
thermodynamics.
This is beautiful. This is like reversible. Oh, yes. This is lovely. I love it. I love this answer. Yes.
So whenever the entropy doesn't increase, that means there is no wear and tear in the system. There is less chance of injury.
Yeah.
You see?
And it
So this is
becomes,
a very beautiful way to gauge whether we are doing it correctly or not without any jerk.
this is so beautiful because Sriram, oh wow. I mean, you made my day. I'll tell you why. Because Patanjali was the first, I think, scientist to recognize that even in the mind level, there is friction. That is why vrittis are forming. So to eliminate that, if you can eliminate the friction in the body, automatically the mind now becomes less frictional. And this is what you're saying, that in the yoga postures, when you eliminate, make it fully reversible, essentially you're eliminating friction in the level of the body. Otherwise, it is like you say, entropy. You've lost some information, which is essentially entropy. But now there
Yes,
is no loss of information. You can play the tape forward and back. It looks perfectly the same.
exactly.
Now the mind has a chance to become frictionless. It is so beautiful. I mean, you've got some fantastic teachers. I love it.
And in fact, we can use this in so many ways. Let me give another example. Suppose, when we go on a vacation, say, and especially in winter when it's snowing outside, the temperature is so cold. So when we come back to our home after a long trip, and we have to turn on the heating system, say.
Right.
So when you turn on the heating, do you set the temperature all the way high, or do you set the temperature a few degrees at a time, little by little, reversible process? So the way that is recommended is to reduce the wear and tear. You do it little by little. For example, if the temperature is 10 degrees Fahrenheit outside, then set the thermostat to 15 degrees, allow the temperature to come to 15 and then to 20 and so forth, slightly increase little bit at a time. The same thing we can use in the practice of yoga asanas as well, because when we are expanding the zone of comfort, don't step so far out of the comfort zone that it will injure the body, that will create wear and tear in the body. So take the next step, delta step, to increase the zone of comfort, and then work your way slowly, increasing the comfort zone little bit at a time.
Right. So this isn't this what is called elastic versus plastic? So you hold the posture for a little bit longer so that it becomes a little bit permanent set. So next time you go there, it's easy, and then you hold it a little bit longer. That's what you're saying?
Exactly. And it uses the same principle of the reversible process. Otherwise, when you take a big leap, then again entropy happens, and that's wear and tear in the system.
Yeah. Oh, it makes so much sense now. Okay. But wait, so in our like offline WhatsApp conversation, you said something about number theory and linking it to, I mean, okay. So please.
Yeah, that actually my teacher used many innovative things in his own personal practice. He didn't teach many of these to the students because they were not classical practices, but he did all sorts of creative innovations. And this was one of them. So one of the things that is associated with the practice of sun salutation is mantras, right? Because not only the 12 postures and the movement of the breath, in the classic practice, each of these postures has an associated mantra with it. And each of the mantras are a way to honor the sun. For example, Om Mitraya Namaha, Om Ravaye Namaha, Om Suryaya Namaha, Om Bhanave Namaha, Om Kagaya Namaha. Like that, there are 12 mantras. So before we get into that number theory, let's see the significance of these mantras, right? So when we chant the mantra out, we're actually breathing out. Because whenever we say something, we are breathing out. It's an exhale. So we have to readjust the inhale, exhale. We have to reformulate how that whole breathing pattern happens. So that is one exercise to do upfront.
Yes.
Right? So these mantras, when we chant out loud, this is actually a pranayama. And this is actually a way to culture the voice, because especially in those postures where we feel a choking sensation. And people notice this in the back bending postures, especially the standing back bend or even the Bhujangasana. In that posture, if we are able to still chant the mantra clearly, loudly, with the same quality as the other chants in the sequence, then we have more control over our voice, more control over the voice box. So this is a great practice by itself. And my teacher was actually trained classical singer, Carnatic musician. And he used to culture his voice by doing these practices of sun salutation, chanting the mantra out loud. In fact, he used to have such a deep, sonorous voice, very deep bass voice. And thanks to this practice of sun salutation and chanting in the sun salutation. Now, he used to introduce many innovative aspects, such as bringing music to the practice of this chanting. So rather than chant in monotone, Om Mitraya Namaha, Om Ravaye Namaha, Om Suryaya Namaha, like that, he used to chant in different musical notes, and each day he used to pick different ragas. Om Mitraya Namaha, Om Ravaye Namaha, Om Suryaya Namaha, Om Bhanave Namaha, like that, Mohanam Ragam. Or Rag Bhoop, for example. And he used to do many innovations around that. And one day he had this very bright idea. That idea was, I mean, this was amazing. I was there when this idea exploded in his head, expressed itself. So the idea that he had was, in Indian classical music, we have mathematical, intricate combinations of swaras. In South Indian music, it's called the karvai. So where intricate patterns of swaras are intertwined, and the swaras, they perfectly synchronize with the tala cycle, the beats cycle. So when we look at the sun salutation, it's basically a beat of 12 that is circling itself. A circular 12 with each step of the sun salutation. Now, imagine this. Supposing that we have a set of, instead of 12 mantras,
if you have 20,
suppose you have 10 mantras. Imagine. So you have two rhythms. One rhythm is the 12 cycle, which is the flow of postures. Now we have a second rhythm, which is 10. Right? Now, two different rhythms. So they will go out of phase after the first round. Right? When do you think it will come back in phase again? When do you think they will both merge?
I don't know. Lowest common multiple, you will come
exactly back. It's the LCM. It's a lowest common multiple. So in this case, it turns out to be 60. So 10 and 12, it is 60, right?
60.
So 60 means it's 5 rounds of, after 5 rounds of sun salutation.
Lovely.
So the point is, many people, when they're doing many rounds of sun salutation, easily they lose track of which round am I in. I'm sure you've experienced this. Or maybe in the practice of pranayams or doing kriya,
we forget the count.
We forget the count because the mind is in such a zoned out space that it's difficult to keep track. I need to remember which round I am in, and I have to do this practice as well. So my teacher's innovation was, forget keeping track of which round I am. You just go with the flow of the 10 cycle with the 12 flow.
Till it comes back in sync with your postures, and then you know it's 12.
And then you know you have completed 5 rounds. That's it.
Beautiful. I love it.
It's amazing, right?
Yes. But okay, so what is the 10 rhythm that he would say? What is the...
He will pick 10 mantras of the sun from different scriptures. For example, we used to chant the Aditya Hridayam. Aditya Hridayam is a mantra that is found in the Ramayana, where just before the war, Rama, he offers his respect to the sun, and this is the mantra. And sage Agastya, actually, he gives him this mantra of the Aditya Hridayam. So he will pick mantras from here, and there is actually Surya Namaskara chant, which we find in the Vedas, and the whole chant is about like more than an hour. So he will pick some mantras from this, and then he will integrate that in the posture. By the way, the example that I gave, 10 and 12 is a very simplistic model.
Yes.
So
no, you can
with
play with
some
it now.
intricate, we can play with it. Yeah.
You can play with it. Yeah. But
The
okay,
main
so
point is, yeah.
Okay, the way I understood is you simply say this 10 things again and again, and you wait for the first one to align itself back to the first asana. Then you know that it's a complete set, isn't it?
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Exactly.
It's amazing. Yeah. I love it. Because eventually you will go out with the first chant will be with a like downward dog instead of forward bend, and then you know, okay, it's not completed, and keep going, keep lovely. I so love this insight. This requires so clear understanding of, yeah, beautiful.
In fact, the first class that I went to study with my teacher, I thought there was some music class that was happening because I knew he was a musician as well. So the door was closed, and he was actually practicing the with the ragas. He was practicing the Sun Salutation mantras at various swaras, various ragas. And I thought, okay, there's a music class happening. I was waiting outside. And then I realized that he was actually doing Sun Salutation with the mantras in various musical notes.
Right. But okay, so have you recorded maybe a video with you saying the mantra and doing it? Because it's not very clear to me how to even do it. Because firstly, I don't remember what the 12 Om XYZ Namaha 12 times. I don't even know that. Is there an easy way to first learn it and
Yes, I have a video on YouTube. I'll send the link later to this video so that you can look it up.
I can link
all
it.
Mantras are there. Yeah.
Okay, great. Lovely. So anything else like you'd like us to know about Sun Salutations? I know there are many things, but one last one before we end.
I would say that we should not lose track of the fact that primarily this is a spiritual practice.
Yes.
Because as the name suggests, it's the sun salutation. It's not just an exercise for the physical body. Mm-hmm. And the reason I mention it is because many times when we do physical exercise, we give ourselves the luxury of thinking about something else. I've seen in gyms, like when people do treadmill, they're watching a TV, and the mind is elsewhere, which is okay because the primary focus there is to benefit the body.
Body, right.
But here, when we say spiritual practice, that means we're engaging the spiritual aspect of ourselves. Namely, we are fully with the practice. The mind is with the practice, the breath is with the practice, the self is with the practice. Our whole awareness is with the practice. Mm-hmm. And because this is a practice for expressing our honor and gratitude to the sun, either the physical sun or the metaphoric sun, that life that resides within us. Yeah. So this aspect should not be missed at all. We can talk about the shoulder cuff and the rotator cuff, and we can talk about the technical details of the asanas, which are important, yes. But then the actual overarching goal, I would say, is to integrate all of them and make it a spiritual practice. And that's how we harness the true benefits of the sun salutation.
Yes, I so fully agree with that. Yes. I mean, the way you started off by explaining that the metaphoric, from the Bhagavad Gita chant where it says the sun is not that physical round ball, it's the one inside of you, which is also the same. I mean, once that, how do you say, that gets ingrained in the mind, automatically, I think the reverence comes because it's at a different level. Yeah.
In fact, we see this thought in many of the scriptures. Even Patanjali talks about, he uses the word prakasha so many times, and Jyotishmati talks about the light that shines through the mind. And he talks about the mind being crystal clear, which allows the brilliance of the self to shine forth. And one of the Shanti mantras that we chant so often, Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya, lead me from darkness to light, the Jyoti, how to bring that Jyoti out. So all these practices will help.
Yeah, lovely. Shriram, I mean, it's such a pleasure to just hang out with you. I wish we can do this more frequently. People will so benefit. Just the way you explain things is so beautiful. I love it. I just totally love it. So thank you very much for coming back on, the Physics of Pranayama channel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandeep ji. And yes, let's organize a few more the next few weeks, months. Yes.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.